We are about to go live with another episode of the Never Again Live podcast from Israel Now. We'll be introducing our guests momentarily, and it'll be an interesting conversation. We've had a show last week, and unfortunately, due to severe technical difficulties, and which I'll be glad to take credit for, we were unable to transmit. Okay, so we're going to try again. We appreciated people who tolerated it and who are back on this evening. So without any further ado, I'm going to go and give a quick introduction, and then I'll be out of here, and you'll have the mayor and the mayor for the duration. So this is the Never Again Live podcast. And tonight's guest will introduce momentarily. You can see us all over on this side of the screen. You can find us on X, YouTube, and Facebook Live. And it's the Trump administration's appointments and their implication for Israel and for the Jews. We'll have our host, Mayor Weinstein, who founded IsraelNow.ca and was the former national director of JDL Canada, and Mayor Jolowitz, past executive director of the ZOA, as well as a past national chairman of the Jewish Defense League. And again, we tried this on Thursday. Sorry we didn't succeed, but we're trying again tonight with crossed fingers and open hearts. So the American people have spoken. Woke is broke. That's our past administration's choices for dignitaries. It's the end of an era, or is that the end of an error? The vice president, with proud members of the presidential staff, has been replaced by a new vice president. Members of the presidential staff, whom we'll be talking about a little later, and what they can do regarding Jews and the state of Israel. In trying to undergo a smooth transition, President Trump will be keeping some members of Biden's team in his cabinet. And there's his cabinet. And there's the members of the past administration who'll be staying in Trump's cabinet for the next 4 years. Other Biden-Harris appointments appropriately addressed diversity, equity, and inclusion. A presidentially approved mandate, and in order to keep diversity of different ethnicities and different locations of origin, we have a member also of the Biden administration from the LGBT crowd, who's Roddy Flynn, representing Irish pride in the Biden administration and Gaelic rights. Of course, Flynn is derived from Gaelic, of the O Gaelic. So sorry, I couldn't resist. I'll be getting some sneers and dirty looks soon. But as we celebrate President Donald Trump's momentous victory, together with the domination of the Senate and the House of Representatives, the question we'll be addressing this evening is, how will his appointments affect the state of Israel and the Jewish people? The president and administration control, believe it or not, 4,000 government positions. That's a lot of work. These include senior executive service employees, Schedule C positions, 350 presidential appointments, and none of these require Senate confirmation. And some newly introduced presidential positions, like driving garbage trucks and making French fries at McDonald's. And then there are 1,200 appointments, which include ambassadors, Supreme Court justices, and cabinet officers, which do require Senate confirmation. Trump's getting to work early. He's already working away.
Here's what I will do to defeat anti-Semitism and defend our Jewish citizens in America. My first week back in the Oval Office, my administration will inform every college president that if you do not end anti-Semitic propaganda, they will lose their accreditation and federal taxpayer support. Truth is, you don't have to do much after that. When you do that, it's going to work miracles. Please sit down. We will not subsidize the creation of terrorist sympathizers, and we're not going to do it certainly on American soil. We're not going to do it anywhere. Next, I will inform every educational institution in our land that if they permit violence, harassment, or threats against Jewish students, the schools will be held accountable for violations of the civil rights law. Very important. Jewish Americans must have equal protection under the law. They're going to get it.
So that's a brief intro of 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Join us in the fight against anti-Semitism at israelnow.ca. Without any further ado, I'm going to check out, and then you'll be hearing from our guests momentarily. Guys, take it over. I'll see you later. Mayor Jolowitz, how was it? Was it okay?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mayor Weinstein. I'm with Mayor Jolowitz. We're going to be talking about the Trump administration. It's like a miracle what's going on. It's almost it's surreal. Last week we had a show and there was a lot of glitches in the show, so let me apologize to everyone for that. And we're going to recap tonight. We'll be discussing the implications of the new Trump administration, the appointments being made, and how that will affect the Jewish people in the state of Israel. Mayor, how are you tonight?
I'm well. I will say this, and I hope that you can hear me, because when I listened to that entire introduction, half of what Gary said, I could not hear because of electronic information, electronic scrambling of what happened.
Okay.
And also, when you just spoke, it came in as muffled. I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. I would love to be able to pretend that we're significant enough that the Iranians have actually hacked the site, but at least half of what was spoken from the beginning of the hour until now, I was not able to hear, and I apologize.
Okay. All right. I did hear. I hope that everybody else does. I could hear you perfectly right now, and I hope you could hear me fine right now. Is the volume?
Okay, I will, if you don't mind, I'll make a couple of comments.
Yes.
Once again, I could hardly hear you, and if in fact I'm just coming off with a mumbled electronic mess, do me a favor and wave me off so I don't continue to speak. Okay?
Right.
And Mayor Jolowitz, let me say
allow me to make
it,
because right now as I speak to you, your face is frozen on my screen. And I'm hoping, I'm the only one who's actually suffering this.
Audience who's watching, a lot of us, it's not frozen on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or in the other room of my office. So we need to check if it's on your end. Bye, guys. Call me if you need me. See ya.
Thank you. Okay.
Anyhow, allow me to say this. I'm going to repeat some of what was said the other night because I know we lost a lot of it, and quite a number of people who contacted me said that they were not able to pick it up. We were talking about this revolution that took place on November 5th in politics. Today, as we speak on Monday, I think we're 63 days to the inauguration of the next president. I described it then, as I will describe it now, as the most consequential election of our times. That phrase is often used. It is absolutely true now. And because this program has a lot to do with Israel and also the status of American Jews, I will repeat some of the most important points. When it comes to this new administration that's going to be coming to power, I have said before, I mentioned this in my own radio show, I mentioned this in the lecture that I do, that Donald Trump is the best American president that Israel has ever had. And I actually would go out and say that he's the best president that Israel will ever have. If one looks at, notwithstanding all those comical people who were part of the cabinet that Gary showed in the beginning, the people who really matter are the people that I want to focus on tonight. We're talking about the positions of the American cabinet, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor. We're talking to a slightly lesser degree, the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, and perhaps, and including the CIA Director. If you look at this past administration, and I won't be long-winded, if you look at the past administration, and you look at Secretary of State, and we talk about Blinken, if you look at the Secretary of Defense, and you talk about Lloyd Austin, if you look at the National Security Advisor, you're talking about Jake Sullivan, if you look at the CIA Director, William Burns, if you look at the UN Ambassador, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Friedman, every one of these people had two things in common. Every one of them had two things in common. It was a necessary ingredient to be part of the Biden foreign policy team. Each of them believed in the feasibility and the desire of an Iran nuke deal, which in essence, anyone who knows anything about politics knows it is a disaster, not only for Israel, but in the long run for the Western world. And the second common denominator which they have is that every one of them supports a two-state delusion.
Right.
Those are the two worst things that we as supporters of Israel, and this is something which not only American Jews or Jews in Israel should be concerned about, it's something that every American should be concerned about. That said, and I'll end in a minute or so, if you take those same positions and the people who've been nominated, you're talking about Rubio for Secretary of State, you're talking about Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, you're talking about National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. And by the way, the National Security Advisor is the only position that actually doesn't require confirmation. It's an appointment. If you talk about the Ambassador to the United Nations, American, Elise Stefanik, and if you talk about the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, it is the best. You cannot put together a more pro-Israel team and a more pro-American team in politics than that. That is the reason that it's a revolution of great consequence, and it takes place on January 20th of the coming year.
So, Mayor, earlier today, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, he gave a speech in the Knesset, and he laid it out it's online. He laid it out about the difficulties with the Biden administration, the types of pressures that they were placing on Israel when first pressure against Israel not to send in ground troops into Gaza. Then we had the whole issue about various hospitals that were being used by Hamas with rockets and weapons and tunnels and everything. Don't go there. And then the disinformation initially by the Biden administration accusing Israel of targeting innocent hospital. Eventually they took it back. Then the unbelievable campaign, do not enter Rafah. Do not enter Rafah. If you enter Rafah, we're cutting off supplies. We're going to penalize you, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Benjamin Netanyahu, he mentioned Joe Biden, and he mentioned by name Anthony Blinken. And he said, I told them that if we have to fight with our fingernails, we'll fight with our fingernails. But fast forward now, the new administration. You look at who we have. Replacing Anthony Blinken, Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio, who has said, just annihilate Hamas completely. Get them out of there. You have the new Secretary of Defense, and he says, like the Hamas called this the Al-Aqsa flood, and he says, build the temple. So, Mayor, go on, explain more about the new administration, how it's going to impact Israel, and I think that Netanyahu is feeling like finally a little bit of a breath of fresh air that he has the freedom to talk.
Yeah. Allow me, if I may, to stay for a few minutes on the old administration,
Yep.
because it hasn't ended yet. It
Right.
hasn't ended yet. They
Mhm.
are, in every sense, a lame duck administration.
Right.
And I think the emphasis here is on lame. They are
Right.
certainly lame. And yet, this pressure that you speak about was even more intensified today. Today, at the United Nations, you're talking about the American ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Friedman, came out and basically condemned Israel for not looking to end the conflict in southern Lebanon.
Yeah.
You're talking about the fact that the American government placed further sanctions on Jewish settlers living in Jewish communities, which is an absurdity. While the Arabs, they did this at exactly the same time that missiles were being launched at Israel, rockets which actually some came from the south, most of them from the north. You're talking about, we've all seen the videos where a building in Ramat Gan was hit. We've had a number of casualties.
Yes.
And what did the United States come out and ask the Lebanon to accept? And what's remarkable, only a few hours ago, both Lebanon, the country, which is not much of a country, and Hezbollah both said that they would accept the American terms of a proposed ceasefire. If Hezbollah is willing to accept American terms for a ceasefire, it means one of two things. Hezbollah is about to be destroyed, or Hezbollah understands that they can leverage America against Israel. In this particular case, it's the latter. Let me tell you why. It's an absurdity. At a time when missiles and rockets are being fired into Israel, all of a sudden Hezbollah says we'll accept the American conditions. The American conditions are that Israel stop its aggression in Lebanon. This is insanity. I'm going to remind someone, because we're talking about the United Nations, I want to remind someone of two, there have been others, but two important UN Security Council resolutions. 2004, Resolution 1559. It basically said, now listen to the language, that the militia group, mind you, in 2004, Hezbollah was a militia group, that the militia group needs to be disarmed and that they have to stop their aggression against Israel. This is in 2004. Well, Hezbollah grew to be much beyond a militia. They are today a powerful, well, they were until Bibi did what Bibi did.
Yeah.
They were a powerful army. So in 2006, there's the Second Lebanon War. Israel goes into the war. Israel, in sense, actually doesn't win the war. One would argue, if that one wants to be fair, that Israel lost that war. 34 days long, and the war ended in 2006 against a much stronger Hezbollah that was not curtailed by Resolution 1559 of 2004. And the UN Security Council issues UN Resolution 1701. That is supposed to be the resolution which is in place today. In place today. All the rockets that were fired, all the arming, Hezbollah encroaching onto Israel, under the Israeli border, and for several weeks last year, crossed into the Israeli border. And the United Nations stood by and did nothing. These resolutions are, forgive the language, it's bullshit. And yet
100%.
today, Lebanon and Hezbollah said that they will accept the U.S. proposed UN resolution, which is going to call for a cessation of hostilities. Now, these resolutions both suggested, or both demanded, both expected that Hezbollah, and Hezbollah having taken over Lebanon, they are the operating government of power, notwithstanding all the losses that they suffered. They were supposed to remain unarmed, demilitarized is the word that was used, south of the Litani River. Well, that was ignored. And today they had, until Israel took care of business against the best wishes of this present regime in America, which has another 63 days to do harm to Israel. They armed, they rearmed, they encroached, they fired missiles. Israel needs to tell the United States to go to hell. We'll take whatever beating you want to give us diplomatically. You're dead. You're lame duck. We don't care about you anymore. What we care about is that the rockets and the missiles, the type that fell on Ramat Gan today and killed Jews, will not happen again. This notion, and who does America send? Who does America send to broker this fraudulent ceasefire? Amos Hochberg, Israeli-born, advocate of a two-state solution, strong proponent of a Iran nuke deal. They said, we don't need Amos Hochberg to work out a ceasefire, no different than we didn't need Qatar, which is the biggest sponsor outside of Iran of Hamas terrorism, and we don't need Turkey, and we don't need Egypt. Countries which are proven to be anti-Israel, we don't need them. We've got 63 days to go. If we need to tread water, we'll tread water. And on January 20th, I trust that the Trump that we voted for is going to allow Israel to finish the job.
Well, that's what Donald Trump said to Netanyahu a few weeks ago. Even he said, "Just do what you got to do. Do what you got to do."
Yeah, there are issues. However, you mentioned Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu has done a great job given the circumstances of prosecuting the war.
Right.
Certainly more in Lebanon than it was in Gaza. Bibi Netanyahu is facing an attempted coup by a deep state in Israel.
Yes.
And therefore, he doesn't have the full support of the country. He's got the full support of the people who matter. He's got the full support of all the army under the rank of general. But the others are looking to upend Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi needs to do what Bibi needs to do, which is to win the war. And there's a difference between defeating the enemy and destroying the enemy. If Israel doesn't destroy the enemy, and as much as I mentioned at the beginning, think that Donald Trump is the best president Israel will ever have, Donald Trump is not looking for Israel to continue wars long into his presidency. He's going to want this to end. And the one cautionary piece that I have offered and I will continue to offer, it's that Donald Trump, who authored the book, The Art of the Deal in 1987, seems to think that with other people, adversaries, opponents, enemies, using your Western mentality. Well, the other side in this particular case doesn't come with a Western mentality. And here's what I fear is going to happen, that the Saudis will approach the American president and his administration, discuss a normalization of relations with Israel, contingent on certain quid pro quos. And that quid pro quo is going to be that Israel end its war in Gaza, that Israel will agree to some kind of timetable which allow the creation of a Palestinian state.
Oh, where'd Mayor go?
Well, he must have lost his connection because your connection is good, my connection is good, and there's nothing wrong with the Restream right now. So that's all on him. So until he gets back on, you could, keep talking a little bit. And I'm going to, let's see.
Well, I'm sure he'll link back on.
As soon as he does, I will. But while we got it here, he is back
there,
on.
I just said him. Okay.
Okay, let's get him back on. There he
Yep.
goes. And
That happened.
I don't know. It's not on our end. I think you need to check your stuff over there because I'm fine. Mayor's fine. My wife's watching in the other room. So if anybody's watching, sorry for these little quirks, but we're doing our best. Back to you guys. I'll check out again.
Yeah, Mayor just disappeared for a moment, but I could hear you very well.
I can tell you're speaking, but I apologize. I can't make out what you're saying. Electronic interference of sorts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, okay, so
Okay.
in spite of these appointments, you think that Donald Trump would want to pursue a Palestine state?
No.
How would that?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't. I don't
Okay.
think and certainly none of his advisors. Rubio is not going to want to. Mike
Right.
Waltz isn't going to want to. Hegseth isn't going to. None of them are going to want to. But that
Mhm.
isn't the thing. I'll remind the audience, as I think I might have briefly mentioned on the previous broadcast, that when Donald Trump first thought that he was going to bring peace in the Middle East, he had this concept which he actually gave name and title to, the deal of the century, peace to prosperity.
Right.
And that was based on certain exchanges. That bombed immediately. It bombed immediately. So what they did is they refashioned it as the Abraham Accords. And by doing the Abraham Accords, what they did is they got two countries in the beginning, the UAE and Bahrain, two nations which had never been in at war physically with Israel.
Right. Right.
Both moderate Gulf states who both said that they would recognize Israel de facto, but there was a quid pro quo, and the quid pro quo that was placed by Trump and Jared Kushner was that Israel, which was at the time contemplating extending sovereignty into parts of Judea and Samaria, specifically the Gush Etzion bloc, we were told that that would be suspended. Suspended means suspended, not canceled, not ended. And yet, at the time, I argued, and I wrote a couple of op-ed pieces, that the Arabs understood that even with Trump, and we're talking about Trump 45 at the time, as long as they said, we will pursue peace as long as you prevent Israel from fulfilling its historic, biblical, geostrategic needs, which is to extend sovereignty to those lands which were liberated in 1967. Benjamin Netanyahu went along with it. And all my colleagues who represented the right wing all said, don't worry, by the time that Trump ends his first term, which ended 4 years ago, everything will be fine. Israel will extend sovereignty. Israel has not extended sovereignty. There's no discussion of it now. And as long as Israel's position needs to be clear. We want peace with the Arabs in exchange for one specific quid pro quo. You give us peace, we give you peace.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, what kind of deal is this? What kind of deal is this?
Yeah, well, show me. Look, again, like I've said on previous shows, you go to the Mamilla Mall in Jerusalem, you see Muslims shopping, going to restaurants, enjoying themselves. Nobody's bothering them. That's in Jerusalem, and throughout the country for that matter, in Israel. You go to Judea and Samaria, can I go to Ramallah and get a cup of coffee without getting my head blown off? And if that's the kind of people that we're dealing with for the so-called two-state solution, then go F yourselves, because it's pie in the sky. Peace and prosperity. Yeah, peace and prosperity. If I could go to that coffee shop and joke around and have a coffee and read the newspaper and nobody bugs me in Ramallah and vice versa and all that, but that's a delusion. That's a complete delusion.
Yeah. I'll give another piece of evidence to this. I don't even need to go to Ramallah, and I've been there many times. I don't need to go to Ramallah. Here's what I look at. When the Abraham Accords were completed in 2020, mind you, with 2020, with every expectation that everything was going to be good. Since 2020, since the signing of the Abraham Accords, and there was a discussion of bringing the Sudan in, Morocco in, and in the future bringing Saudi Arabia. There were, at the time, and the number is larger now, there were 24 UN resolutions which were entered, which were condemnation of Israel. In every single one of those resolutions, every one of the so-called, and I emphasize so-called, moderate Arab states voted against Israel. They didn't abstain in the vote; they voted against Israel.
When we
talk about the United Nations and their ceasefires, on average, and one can easily do this. You look at the last 30 UN resolutions. You can go back deep. The last 30 or 40 UN resolutions, which had anything to do with Israel and its fight for survival, the average vote when it came to Israel, the pro-Israel vote would average 11 nations. The anti-Israel vote averaged 113 nations, and the abstained averaged 34, 35. That is the reality. And when one looks at those, there wasn't a single Arab state that abstained on a single one of those votes. They voted against Israel and against Israel and against Israel. If the Abraham Accords allowed Jews from Ramat Aviv or from Tel Aviv to simply fly to Abu Dhabi, to Dubai, to one of the Emirate states, and simply buy purses, expensive purses that they couldn't buy in Tel Aviv, I'm sorry, I would rather have Gush Etzion, a sovereign Jewish land. That was not a trade-off that I consider to be a good trade-off. Notwithstanding the fact that all the players have been completely disingenuous in using the language to describe it. Bibi Netanyahu talks about peace with a moderate Arab state. They were not peace treaties, Bibi. We are not stupid. Donald Trump talked about the fact that they were peace treaties. They were not peace treaties. Jared Kushner talked about the fact they were not peace treaties. They were normalization of relations, which is something different. Do I want normalization of relations with Israel's hostile enemies? Of course I do. But not at the cost that's being expected that Israel pay. No, not for that.
How about to add this to the equation? That during the period of time of the Abraham Accords, there has never been such an increase in terrorism throughout Israel. From the territories, from Gaza, there's been, especially after when the temporary government coalition came into being with Bennett and Lapid, there was such a rise of terrorist attacks and major celebrations throughout. So, you know, one would think that with the Abraham Accords and peace and prosperity and all that talk, that it would certainly put a damper on it. No, it did not. And not only that, but there was an awakening of Arab students on universities in Israel proper to start flying the Palestine flag under the Bennett and Lapid government that lasted not so long. But I remember that, and a number of campuses, this was going on. And the anti-Jewish incitement was going on like crazy. So yeah, go fly to Dubai and buy your purse there because you want to impress your friends, but come back and look at reality in Israel. And I was there for a period of time, 4 months, to observe that. And I couldn't believe the amount of in Tel Aviv, in other cities, major terrorist attacks. And because of that, with the next election that came, because that government fell, Itamar Ben-Gvir grew. A lot of people went to him, embraced his message, and said, definitely, we're voting for him, and Bezalel Smotrich and others, because they saw there's no end to this.
Yeah, and there's precedent. I've often said, I'm not the only one who said it. It's been said many, many times in history, attributed to many different thinkers, that the only lesson of history is that there are no lessons to be learned from history. In this particular case, the lesson of the proliferation of terrorism, as you mentioned, September 13th, 1993, was the day that I used to describe as the darkest day in Israel's history. Prior to October 7th, I used to describe it as such. And the reason I mentioned September 13th, 1993 is the darkest day in Israel's history, it's the day that we signed this peace treaty with Yasser Arafat. Bill Clinton was there to make sure that everything was all good and well, and peace was to follow. What followed was an increase of terrorism, which is to the tune of 425% of what it had been before. And yet, all these true believers who somehow believe that peace could be found with an implacable enemy continue to believe in this nonsense of Oslo. October 7th was the byproduct of Oslo. The fact that we thought that we could somehow placate
Mayor, let me just add, let me just add for a second, and you'll carry on this. But Bill Clinton recently, when the election was going on, as he was campaigning for Kamala Harris, but he gave a presentation in Michigan, and he said Arafat lied, and that was
Yeah.
it. And he went on about Jewish attachment for thousands of years to Israel, but that's not the main thing. The main point is he said Arafat lied, and that's who we're signing these bullshit deals with, and we pay with Jewish blood.
I I don't know if it's my turn because I'm having electronic feedback.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he was referring to an Arafat several years later, actually. He was referring to an Arafat who failed when Ehud Barak basically offered,
Sure.
he offered Arafat everything, and Arafat basically said no, because the offer suggested that there'd be some kind of recognition of Israel as part of a two-state solution, and the reason
Yes.
that the Arabs rejected two-state solution, it's so interesting that the State Department, the American government, pushes for a two-state solution, whereas the Arabs themselves don't want a two-state solution, because the two-state solution presupposes that one of those two states might indeed be a Jewish state. And so I don't know what I'm looking at now.
I don't know either.
Okay. Anyhow, this notion, this belief that all of a sudden, after 5,000 years of warfare between man and after 1,400 years of Islamic vitriol against the Jews, that all of a sudden that some Secretary of State is going to be confirmed by the Senate, is going to bring peace in the Middle East. In fact, there are people in the State Department today who are telling Biden and his team to hurry up. We've only got 63 days to deliver peace. We live a delusion, and it's a very dangerous delusion. If you're the country that's the recipient of all these missiles that are coming in, we need to understand that that's not the way things work. It doesn't work that way. And those in the Western world who don't understand the Islamic mind, who don't understand the Muslim mind, will forever be surprised by this implacable enemy that is the enemy of not only Israel, but of the Western world. This is not a lesson to be learned. Now, if Israel, the one thing that we learned is the only time that there was actually quiet in Gaza wasn't after Israel withdrew in August of 2005, and basically with the unilateral disengagement gave the Arabs everything that they should have wanted. Go build, as everyone said, go build your Singapore in the beaches of Gaza. And instead they built the tunnels and the missiles. And what Israel needs to understand is that the only time that Gaza was under control was after 1967, when Israel took control of Gaza, and the Arabs were afraid at the time that Ariel Sharon was going to crush them, that he was going to do to them what they would have done to Jews had they prevailed. And they behaved wonderfully. And the moment that they understood, the Jew who said, no, we're not like that. No. And all of a sudden, the Jew forgot that for the Arab, kindness is weakness. Kindness is viewed as weakness. And the moment that Israel began to give employment, mind you, Arabs were going freely to Israeli hospitals across the border. We're talking about Hamas leaders. Ismail Haniyeh had a daughter and a niece who were both treated in Israeli hospitals at the same time that rockets were falling in Israel. And I ask you, who's insane here? And the answer is, we were.
Yes.
We were.
100%.
Yeah.
Aiding and abetting the enemy.
The one thing that I want from Donald Trump and his team, and I'll be happy, is for them to allow Israel to do what Israel needs to do. We don't need an American soldier. We don't need your interference. And no, we don't need America to help us take out the Iranian nukes, which, by the way, only about 12 hours ago, a spokesman for the Iranian government came out and said, we are within 24 hours of establishing a military nuclear capability. My God, if ever Israel needed a reason to say, really? And destroy them, it was on the basis of that comment. They should have turned to Blinken and said, oh my God, they're only 24 hours away, and destroy them. The reason I say that Israel doesn't need America to destroy them, would it have helped? Absolutely. Could they do it in conjunction with America in a manner that would be ideal? Absolutely. What Israel needs to do today, in fact, before I finish the sentence, is destroy the oil fields. Destroy the oil fields. Destroy the oil fields and destroy the oil fields. The fact that the incoming American government has said that we're going to impose greater sanctions on Iran. Well, they have survived sanctions before. They suffered, but they survived. Israel needs to decapitate Iran so Iran can no longer sponsor its proxies who have been murdering and continue to murder Jews. Israel needs to end it now. Israel cannot assume that a year from today, with Trump as a president now for 10 months, that Israel is going to say, my God, our information shows that Iran is becoming a threat and we need to strike. Trump won't allow them to do it under those circumstances. They need to do it now. And they won't. And they won't.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's a clear and present danger, and it has to be taken out. Every single threat from Iran has to be taken out. There's no question about it.
With winter coming, do we care that the European nations have to pay a little more money to heat their homes because Israel took out the Iranian oil fields? Well, if the trade-off is that you'll have
we
dead
don't
Jews
care.
in Haifa, I don't give a damn how cold the Danish or the Dutch are going to be this winter. Destroy the oil fields.
100%. 100%. And you have people in the administration that have been appointed by Trump right now that are saying Israel should just do that. So, they shouldn't be waiting.
Yeah.
And, obviously, with the pressure from Blinken and Biden and all of that, just buy your time and do what you got to do.
I don't mean to be overly critical. I'm not critical. I am in a state of euphoria because of the election results on November 5th. A state of euphoria. I've been lecturing for 50 years now. 50 years. I cannot remember ever being so buoyant about happenings in America as they affect Israel. This is something that if played, I'm sorry, let me say this. If played correctly, it'll be as significant as Israel's war in 1967. And because I want to mention this, we've been talking about Trump's victory and everything else. There needs to be a little more emphasis spoken about, and it's implied. Everything you've said and everything that I've said implies the greater good, perhaps even greater than Trump coming into office, is what we avoided by Kamala Harris not being elected. That would have been a disaster of epic proportions for Israel. Would Israel have survived? Of course Israel would have survived at a cost. The defeat of the Democratic regime that hated Israel, the Democrats who accused Israel of genocide, the Democrats who sanction Israel even today in Judea and Samaria, settlers living in Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. This is insanity. The Democratic regime, which supports a two-state solution, which demands a two-state solution, the Democratic regime, which was in collusion with the Islamic Republic of Iran, the American administration, which, let's be perfectly honest, which financed, it's a thing called fungibility, which financed the Iran war against Israel coming from the Hamas, the Houthis, and from Hezbollah. This is the American administration that we're kissing off. They're gone. They're lame duck. They can do no more initiatives. And whatever embargo that they want to institute against Israel, Donald Trump can reinstate it in 63 days, as he should.
The Iranian regime wants to develop nuclear bombs and transport them to their proxies that are surrounding Israel. There's no question about it, and that threat has to be taken out. One thing that I'm reading about the Trump administration, that they want to work for regime change also in Iran. I don't know how long that would take, if that's really going to be the policy. I've read conflicting reports on that, but if there would be a regime change in Iran, that could be very significant. Where'd Mayor go?
Well, he is the only connection we're having any problem with. So it's sorry, audience, keep listening. He'll be back, but it's not on our end. Of course, Mayor Weinstein, you sound fine. I think I sound fine. So while we have a second, you want to just talk, the episode we were going to talk about is Trump's appointments. So maybe we should spend a moment talking about Trump's appointments until Jolowitz is back. Does that
Well,
sound
he'll
like?
be back in a second, but
I'm watching. As soon as he's back, we'll know it. But I think that somebody mentioned earlier, Marco Rubio. Rubio has consistently stated that the road to Israel's security is peace through strength, just like you all have been saying. And he has called for Israel to destroy every element of Hamas. That's who we need in administration. He said that Israel cannot exist with these savages. They have to be eradicated. Following Iran's direct attack on Israel, Rubio accused the Biden administration of working to prevent an Israeli response because they were catering to anti-Israel, anti-Semitic bias. Rubio's advocated for a lot of stuff, but now I see that Weinstein and we have Jolowitz back, so I'm going to stop stalling and put them back on the screen. See you all a little bit later.
good. I don't know what the connection was, but great you're back. Mayor, so let me ask you a question.
I can't.
Can you hear?
I can't hear. It's all jarbled.
Is it right now?
Well, it's not jarbled. No one else hears it jarbled, and no one else's voice is coming out.
Yeah, but if he is,
You want to do a speed check on your internet connection?
No.
I'm talking about Jolowitz. No. Okay. Again, for some reason it's picking on you. So we can hear it. My wife can hear it in the other room, and 164 people listening can hear it. So guys, I'm going to click off again and just keep talking until you don't want to talk anymore.
Okay. Okay, Mayor, how is the sound right now?
That sentence I heard. Until that sentence, you were frozen.
Okay.
And you're frozen once again.
Okay, if you could hear me.
I'm sorry, once again, you're frozen.
But he's not frozen on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, or on YouTube. He's just frozen.
Then I'll bid you guys farewell, and I'll go do my Thanksgiving
shopping. No, because everybody can hear you. Keep talking.
Okay.
Well, my problem is I don't want to talk over Mayor. Mayor is a gracious host, and I don't want to talk over him if, in fact, he's talking, and I don't know that he is.
No, I'm not talking right now, but I just want you to pick it up on. Well, we're almost at the end of the hour, anyway, so we could wrap it up with some final comments about the change that we're hoping to see. There still is a possibility that the deep state will try and take out Trump before he's sworn in. Anything could happen. So that's how dirty the game of politics is right now with the Democrats. But so Mayor, so how do you see it happening from day one if he gets he's sworn in and we have these appointments and they're solidified?
Yeah. I think the unexpected consequence of the Trump victory in America is twofold of the victory. The Democrats have long argued, because it always favored their argument, to suggest that the Electoral College should be put away, that we should only go by the popular vote. Well, the popular vote is 3.5 million more in favor of Trump. So that argument suggesting that Trump was illegitimate is no longer the case. Something else has happened, that flip side of that coin. And it's in evidence actually in sporting events that we've seen in America and other places. Wherever Donald Trump is gone, the very people who were somewhat squeamish about advertising I'm just getting a couple of things on my screen saying, we don't see you. But nonetheless, I'm going to keep talking. Is the fact that there has been a groundswell of support for Trump above and beyond anything we've ever imagined, from people who were the middle of the road, the people, the undecided, the undeclared, and everything else. Trump, I think, begins his presidency on January 20th, 2025, in a much stronger position than he did the last time he took. And he needs to take advantage of it. He needs to take advantage of it. Trump is coming in with a mandate unlike anything that anyone expected. Now, there is going to be opposition because the Democrats or the liberals or the American media more specifically is against all of these people who we've mentioned who are going to be appointed in the various positions. Even though we've not spoken about the most controversial, for example, is Matt Gaetz, not appointed, but nominated to be the Attorney General. Matt Gaetz, he's been attacked on everything. He's got a really good record when it came to BDS. He will certainly do the right thing when it comes to the anti-Semitism on campus that we saw, which was out of control and completely ignored by the present Department of Justice. Anti-Semitism found an audience that it never knew that it had, because the Biden administration did nothing about it. Well, it's interesting how a number of Jewish groups, the Anti-Defamation League, for example, J Street, but the Anti-Defamation League has come out and condemned Matt Gaetz, saying that Matt Gaetz once brought a speaker to the State of the Union address, and certainly a checkered history as to whether or not he was considered a Holocaust denier of sorts. Now, it's interesting that the Anti-Defamation League would be concerned about who Matt Gaetz brought to the State of the Union address, when speaking at the State of the Union address was a president of the United States who was anti-Semitic. Did that bother the Anti-Defamation League? Did it bother the Anti-Defamation League that Barack Obama for 8 years gave his State of the Union address and he was an anti-Semite? Did it bother J Street, which condemns these appointments? They condemn these appointments as they look for these fraudulent words, racist and what have you.
Right.
J Street is criticizing Trump because Trump appointed Matt Gaetz, but J Street had no problem in 2021 inviting as their keynote speaker to their national convention Mahmoud Abbas, architect of the pay for slave, the person who in fact on November 4th, a day before the election, called Trump worse than Hitler. And all of it, and here I have the letter wishing Trump good luck. Now that Trump is prevailed, he wants his two-state solution, the one that he really doesn't believe in. But it's remarkable that J Street would criticize Trump, but invite Mahmoud Abbas, a mass murderer.
Right.
Spoke
100%.
And the Anti-Defamation League. My comment to both those American Jewish organizations, and you've heard me say it before, go to hell. Just go to hell.
Right. And hopefully, J Street and all their entire network will completely fold during the Trump administration, because with J Street, I think it's over 80% of the membership is intermarried, and the less connection people have with Judaism, certainly they have less of a connection to Israel. It's got to be shut down, and the only reason that it's propped up is because they have financial support from the likes of Soros and others who are anti-Israel.
I missed most of what you said because electronically it was muffled, but I will tell you this. But I will tell you this. I agree with it anyhow. As we ideologically understand who the enemy is both
Yes,
foreign and domestic.
right.
And I will say this only because I've got this last opportunity. The clock has ticked and everything else. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank you for the time. Forgive me if I'm not able to continue to participate because of the sound problems. I hope that we can fix them in the future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Final question for you,
Just let me,
Mayor.
final point
Final
before
question.
that. I got
Yeah.
a message from England from our friend
Yeah.
Martin, the rock and roll Zionist. He said the picture is fine and the voice is fine where he is. And he just sent me that on his cell phone that everything is fine. And he's
Okay.
listening in from England.
Okay, Mayor, I got a
I
question for you.
apologize. I didn't hear a word you said.
Right. Okay. Can you hear my question? I got a question right now for you.
I can hear you now. I can hear
Okay,
you now.
so yeah, the yard site for Rabbi Kahana is, it's like now. And but if Rabbi Kahana was alive, and with this type of administration, the type of people who we are talking about, Mike Huckabee, Marco Rubio, the who's going to be the Secretary of Defense, that he says build the temple. Vivek, who's going to be a senior advisor in the administration, who says just throw out the enemy from Israel, throw them out. I mean, I believe that this administration would sit down with Rabbi Kahana to hear his case and his presentation. Give me your comment on that.
I heard most of what you said, so I'll answer the way that I think that you asked. Rabbi Kahana would certainly have more in common with Mike Huckabee and Pete Hegseth than Bibi Netanyahu has with Anthony Blinken or Jake Sullivan. Let me just end with that. Yeah.
100%. Well put. Well put.
Okay. Anyhow, again, I apologize. Whatever. Thank you very much, and
Yep.
we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you. Bye-bye.